They say war makes for strange alliances, but some alliances are so improbable, so buried in secrecy, that they almost sound like fiction. This is one of those stories. In the winter of 1942, America stood on edge. Pearl Harbor had been attacked. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, sinking supply ships within sight of American shores, and in New York Harbor, the nation's most vital port, something happened that shook the Navy to its core. The French luxury liner SS Normandie, seized by the U.S. government and renamed USS Lafayette, caught fire while being refitted. Flames tore through the vessel, reducing what had once been the pride of France to a smoldering hulk. The Navy officially ruled it an accident, welding sparks, a tragic mishap. But whispers spread immediately. Sabotage, German agents, Axis spies. And if sabotage was possible inside the most heavily guarded dockyard in America, then the war effort was vulnerable from within. This fear set into motion one of the strangest intelligence operations of the Second World War. It was called Operation Underworld, and it brought together two forces no one would have imagined: the U.S. Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, and the American Mafia. Securing the waterfront. The Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, had a problem. Their agents were strangers on the docks. They asked questions, but longshoremen stayed silent. The waterfront in New York was its own kingdom, ruled by shadowy figures who controlled labor, smuggling, and protection rackets. The government had authority on paper, but in practice, the docks answered to the mob. And so, faced with the fear of Axis sabotage, ONI made a choice that would never appear in any standard military manual. They turned to the underworld. They began with Joseph Sachs Lanza, a mob-connected figure who controlled the Fulton fish market. Lanza was already under investigation for racketeering, but he knew every worker, every pier, every whisper on the docks. ONI agents realized quickly, with Lanza's help, the silence lifted. Information flowed, threats receded. But Lanza was only the beginning. The Navy needed bigger guarantees. They needed someone with power that stretched across every wharf and pier of New York Harbor. That led them to a name already infamous in American headlines: Charles Lucky Luciano. The Luciano connection. At the time, Luciano wasn't running anything. He was sitting behind bars, serving a long sentence for compulsory prostitution charges. Officially disgraced, locked away by none other than Thomas E. Dewey, the prosecutor who made his career by bringing Luciano down. But to ONI, Luciano represented something far more valuable: access. Through him, they could reach the entire Sicilian and Italian-American underworld in New York and beyond. How exactly that contact was made remains partly in the shadows. What we do know comes from the 1954 Herland's Report, a post-war investigation ordered to uncover whether the rumors were true. And yes, the report confirmed it. U.S. Naval Intelligence contacted Luciano while he was in prison. They arranged his transfer to a more convenient facility. Meetings were held. Information was passed. According to Navy officials, Luciano promised cooperation. He would use his influence to keep the docks clear of Axis agents, prevent strikes, and smooth labor tensions. In exchange, there was an understanding, though not explicitly written, that his wartime services might be considered in any future parole or commutation. What the Navy wanted. The goals were practical, not glamorous. They weren't asking Luciano to run spies into Berlin or assassinate Nazi officers. They wanted stability in the ports. They wanted the Mafia's invisible hand to keep the docks moving smoothly, to make sure no ship was delayed and no German agent found sanctuary in the tangle of unions and rackets.
The Navy wanted silence where silence mattered and noise where it counted. And by their own later admission, ONI believed the arrangement helped. Strikes ceased, theft diminished. No further sabotage crippled New York Harbor. But this secret alliance would not remain confined to the United States. Sicily, the next step. In 1943, the Allies planned their first assault on European soil, the invasion of Sicily, codenamed Operation Husky. It was to be the largest amphibious invasion in history up to that point. But Sicily was not just another battlefield. It was a landscape tangled with history, culture, and most importantly, the Sicilian Mafia. ONI knew they needed local intelligence, guides who spoke the dialect, maps of harbors, and knowledge of the terrain. And so the theory goes, their contacts in New York became their bridge to Sicily. Through Luciano's network, intermediaries identified figures who might assist the Allies. One name surfaces repeatedly in accounts: Calogero Vizzini, a mafia boss who allegedly cooperated with Allied forces during the landings. Stories claim his men guided soldiers through the countryside, helped secure villages, and even raised the American flag in liberated towns. But here is where history becomes murky. Some historians argue that the Mafia's role in Operation Husky has been exaggerated, inflated by rumor and post-war myth-making. The Allies already had multiple sources of intelligence, from aerial reconnaissance to resistance networks. The Mafia, according to skeptics, played at most a marginal role. Yet others point to documented Navy requests for local contacts, to reports of smooth cooperation in areas where Mafia influence was strongest. The truth likely lies somewhere between, not decisive, but not irrelevant either. And this is where Operation Underworld moves from documented fact into contested history. The aftermath. What is indisputable is what happened next. In 1946, Governor Thomas E. Dewey, the very man who had once made his reputation convicting Luciano, commuted his sentence. Luciano was released from prison on the condition that he be deported back to Italy. The official reason? His wartime cooperation. Dewey himself acknowledged that intelligence officials credited Luciano's assistance with aiding national security during a time of crisis. To many, this was an outrage, a mob boss walking free because of a backroom deal with the government. To others, it was simply the cold calculus of war. When survival is on the line, even the dirtiest hands can be put to use. Luciano never returned to America. He lived out his life in Italy, still a figure of influence, still shadowed by the legend of Operation Underworld. Secrets revealed. For years, the entire story remained classified. Only fragments leaked into the press. But by the 1950s, rumors had grown so loud that an official investigation was ordered. That inquiry, the Herlins Report, pulled together Navy testimony, prison records, and intelligence memos. It confirmed the contacts, confirmed the cooperation, but downplayed some of the more sensational claims. The report admitted the Navy had indeed worked with Luciano. It admitted that organized crime figures had been leveraged for wartime advantage. But it insisted that the Mafia's role in the invasion of Sicily was likely overstated. Still, the facts were undeniable. The United States government, in the midst of its greatest war, had struck a bargain with its own underworld. Legacy of Operation Underworld. What do we make of this today? On one hand, Operation Underworld shows the sheer pragmatism of wartime intelligence. The Navy had a problem. The Mafia had a solution. The deal was made. The docks were secured, and the war effort continued. On the other hand, it leaves behind troubling questions. Did this cooperation strengthen the Mafia's grip on American cities in the post-war years? Did the U.S. government, in its desperation, legitimize the very criminal empires it once swore to destroy? And perhaps most chillingly, what does it say about the thin line between national security and organized crime when in the shadows of war, the two become allies? Operation Underworld was not a Hollywood invention. It was real, documented, and investigated. Yet its full scope remains debated, shrouded in secrecy, myth, and half-truths. It is a reminder that behind every great war lies another battlefield, the hidden war of espionage, crime, and quiet deals never meant to see the light of day. Because sometimes to fight an enemy abroad, you must first make a pact with an enemy at home. So now I ask you, do you think the Mafia's role in World War II was truly decisive, or was it a small piece of a much larger intelligence puzzle? Drop your thoughts in the comments,